everyone, and welcome back to Story of the World Highlights. Today we'll be discussing Chapter 10, which takes place in Japan and China. So let's start with Japan. In Japan, we had Ieyasu, as you remember. He was the shogun that we last talked about. Now, during his time, we saw lots of trade happening between Western countries in Europe and Japan. And when we have trade happening, people, traders, they come, they mingle with the people, they start talking to them, they share their interests like religion, and their interests influence and can spread to the people they share them with, right? That's how that works. Now, with that, some of the daimyo in the regions, they were like, you're trying to spread Catholicism? You want to send missionaries in here? No. And others were like, interesting. Okay, wow, I like Christianity. I like Catholicism. Let's go. And so with that, we started to see an increase in missionaries and Catholicism in Japan. And I want to take a moment to talk about something the book says. The book talks about Christianity, and then it also talks about Jesuit missionaries. And you might start to get confused about all these religious terms, but I want to be clear about something that the book is not clear about. Christianity is the group of religious peoples who believe in Jesus Christ. So that's the Protestants. That's the Christians over in Catholicism. That's all of them, right? Christians are Catholics and Protestants and any other religion that believes that Jesus is the Son of God. They're all Christians. But our book keeps saying Christianity, and what they really mean is Catholics. And I'll get to a little bit more of that later, why they're specifically meaning Catholics. And Jesuits are just a flavor of Catholicism. They're just one branch. But again, we saw a rise in Catholicism in Japan. And Ieyasu was getting a little nervous about this. So Ieyasu went to his Western advisor on all things dealing with Europe. And his name was William Adams. And he was a Dutch merchant who was invited to stay and be an advisor for Ieyasu. Now, if you remember, the Dutch in the Netherlands are Protestant. And Protestants don't like Catholics, right? So he said, hey, what's the deal with these Catholic missionaries? I'm seeing an increase. Some of the daimyo are really into it. Should I trust them? And he was the wrong person to ask. He was very biased. He was very against Catholics because he was a Protestant. And he said, listen, merchants equal missionaries. Missionaries equal soldiers. Soldiers equal Spain taking over. And that's how it will happen. You'll lose Japan. So don't let the missionaries in. And Ieyasu heard this and was like, okay. No Catholics. And again, Christians, Protestant is a Christian. William Adams was a Christian. But specifically, again, we're talking about Catholics. So Ieyasu tried to make some rules to try and prepare and protect against this threat. Number one, he started with just restrictions. And that wasn't working. So he decided to go to a more intense level. He said, all the missionaries, get out. No more missionaries. Bye-bye. And so they were all forced to leave Japan. Now, when he died, his son, Hidetada, he was the ruler, the shogun, during the 30 Years' War, which we just learned about. And he watched the 30 Years' War, and he was shocked. He saw, from what he was observing, that a Catholic country, the Holy Roman Empire, the region, they were taking over other land in countries, or trying to force Catholicism and stop other religions. Now, Japan is Buddhist, and they were afraid that if the Holy Roman Emperor could do that to other countries, he could do that to Japan, and that was terrifying. So he took an even stronger stance against Catholics in the country. And he said, all Japanese Catholics, bye-bye. He killed them all. Then he said, all priests, you must leave Japan. If you don't leave, jail. So he was a very serious, hard, no Catholic ruler. And his son, Iemitsu, I'm probably saying that wrong, but he also took it another step further. He said, okay, we've kicked out all the priests, we've kicked out all the missionaries, we've killed all the Japanese Catholics, but we still see more influence or risk of influence. And he thought that the risk was going to be if Japanese traders or Japanese people left Japan and met missionaries and then brought back the influence. So he said, no more leaving, no more coming. Minus the Dutch, who they saw as non-threatening because the Dutch were not trying to convert people. That was really a Catholic thing. And so they said, well, okay, you can trade with us in Nagasaki down in the south. That's okay. Everything else, no way. Bye-bye. So this is what the start of Japan's isolation period looked like. Now, the second part of our chapter dealt with China. So China at the time had two big populations. We had the Han Chinese in the south, and then in the top, in an area called Manchuria, we had the Manchu people. So the Han Chinese didn't like the Manchu people. They thought that they were wild and barbarians. They're like, no. And the Manchu people, they didn't like the Han Chinese because they kept coming into Manchuria and stealing farmland and taking their food and supplies and animals. So they didn't like them. Now, at the same time, the Han Chinese lived in their area, and their ruler was called Ming. That was the family name. And so that's why it was called the Ming Dynasty, because the ruler was the Ming family. Now, the Ming Dynasty saw a giant period of being poor, weak, and having no food. This was due to a lot of reasons. First, fighting with Hideyoshi. Remember, they had the lots of battling in Korea. That cost them a lot of money. At the same time, their population was growing, so more people. And more people and not enough money leads to no food. They don't have enough supplies and resources. Their soldiers, they couldn't pay their soldiers. They couldn't feed their soldiers, so the soldiers stopped being soldiers. They just quit. And at the same time that all of these bad conditions were happening, they also had unexpected bad weather and a really cold winter that killed a lot of crops. So very bad period. All the bad things were happening, and that caused the people to be really upset. The Han Chinese were really upset with the situation. And when you don't like your living situation, you take it out on the leader because you want to blame somebody, right? So they decided to fight against the leader, the ruler, Emperor Ming. And their leader was somebody called Su Chang. Now, Su Chang took a band of rebels and he stormed the castle, ready to fight in Peking, the capital. But when he got there, no one was guarding the castle. All the soldiers had died of plague, or they had abandoned their jobs because of the conditions. And seeing that a rebel leader was about to take over, the emperor killed himself because he didn't want the enemy to kill him. And with that, we saw a rebel leader taking over Han Chinese. Now, the remaining Ming family members were like, hey, Manchu people, will you come and help us? Will you come and help us defeat this rebel leader? And the Manchu people said, okay, we'll help you. And they went and helped. But when they won, they took over. They didn't let the Ming people take over. They didn't like them, remember? They're like, you steal from us. We don't like you. And so they took over and started what was called the Manchu Dynasty. Now, during the Manchu Dynasty, we saw the Manchu start to bully the Han. Remember, they don't like the Han Chinese. So they had restrictions against them. Their children couldn't play together with the Manchu children. They said to all of the Han Chinese that you had to cut your hair and wear them just like the Manchu people. And hair to the Han Chinese was very special. And so to cut them and make it the style of the Manchu seemed horrible. They were like, oh, I don't want to do that. But they had to. And so the Han Chinese were not living in great conditions. They were being bullied. They were treated poorly. And the Manchu were being ruthless. So being really big bullies. Now, when the second Manchu leader took over and became emperor, his name was Kangxi. He said, hey guys, you know, there's more Han Chinese than there's Manchu people. They could easily outtake us. It's in our best interest to be nice to them. And so he decided to be nice to the Han Chinese. He made their taxes less. He treated them better. And eventually it became much better living conditions for both groups of people. And we saw China start to flourish, which means that it started to become stronger and it ended up making more money. And that is how China really went from being poor and weak to strong and wealthy. So that's the end of chapter 10. I'll see you for chapter 11.